Hello, everybody, and welcome to our peer-to-peer session, The Basics of Good Web Design for DIYers. This session forms part of the peer-to-peer series with New Bedford Creative. My name is Marianella Perry, and I am the Senior ARPA Fellow at New Bedford Creative. I would like to present our guest speaker, artist and design professional, Helen Granger, who will share strategies and core concepts for making a great website to promote your work.
Hi, I'm Helen Granger, as you've all heard now, and I am an artist, and most of what I am going to present to you is stuff that I have learned over 30 years of making websites. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. We're going to do a lot of stuff on the screen in my presentation and otherwise because it's all digital. So, all right. So the basics of good web design for do-it-yourselfers, strategies and core, you've heard all that. But the important thing is see this goofy stock photo down here with all the tools. I use that because this is a presentation about web design, not graphic design. We're not going to talk about fonts and colors very much at all, maybe in a small way, but a lot of it is the basic elements you need to make a website good. And that it relates very well to building anything else, a desk, a building, anything of that sort. So it's a good concept to keep in the back of your mind. We're not talking graphic design here. So today we will cover why good design matters, the terminology and definitions I'll be using, user interface standards and what is a user interface, UI better practices, 3 pillars of good web design as developed by myself, and the good stuff and some resources. So why good design matters. It's pretty simple. A good website design keeps the visitor on your site long enough to learn something about you or what you're trying to promote. Confusing and poorly designed sites will always drive users away. So having some knowledge about what makes good website design can help you build your own or even tell someone else how to build your site, or even tell an AI, which might happen next week, how to build your website. And always, it's about, to me, relation. A good website has been developed with the user in mind. You're being kind to people because you want them to be interested in you. Making a difficult to read or understand website doesn't help you in any way. So we're going to talk about definitions and terminology. You can see this is what we call a wireframe. It's the basic page structure of most websites these days. So your user interface is anything you can see on a computer screen. And everything we're talking about are elements of a user interface, including the page elements of a header, which is the top of the page, a footer, which is the bottom of the page. And you'll notice that I'm using the word page, and that's why I call this a brief history of publication design, because every concept that we're talking about comes from publishing books and magazines. You are essentially creating a publication as well when you build a website. So keeping that concept in mind helps too. Is this a magazine? Is it a newspaper? Is it a newsletter? Is it a portfolio, etc.? So the middle of your page, everything between your header and your footer is some form of content. And this again is structure. You can think of this as the roof, the foundation, and every room in between, right? So every building needs a roof. And it's a good idea if it has a foundation. There's a reason why those things are there. They give information to your user. Navigation is what you see on most websites. I often call it a menu. That's why it's here. That's sort of an older way of referring to it. But it's essentially the way that somebody finds things on your website. That's why it's navigation. This is their compass. There's a concept of above and below the scroll. So that is better to see on an actual website. So we're going to go to one that I built, or I built with people, not by myself. And you will see here that this is what we call above the scroll. So when I start to scroll, you see other stuff. So we're going to talk about how important this area is because everything of essential importance on your site has to have some breadcrumb here for people to find it elsewhere. Links and buttons, you're all familiar with from using websites. Basically, a button is a graphic element that holds a link. But a link is anything that takes you somewhere else, either on the site or outside of the site, on the internet. And calls for actions are often buttons. It's just a term that I want you to understand because you're going to hear CTA a lot. It's important on a website to get people to do things, to interact. And a call for action can be as simple as subscribe or, contact us. But there's always a thing that says, here's something you can do to keep going on my website. Now, again, user interface, everything that we see on the screen, we have now more understanding what people need. So these are some standard good practices in user interface. You never convey important information in a graphic because not everyone will see that graphic. There's lots of reasons why that may be the case or not the case in any given situation, but you really can't do it. So you always want to use alt text on images, and we'll get into that further as well, but also you don't want to use an image with text on it. Find a way to do it some other way so that people can read what you're doing. A real basic now in digital design is that fonts should never be less than 16 pixels high because it's almost impossible to read for a lot of people. And on a phone, that's it. Mobile websites, nothing less than 16 pixels because you can't click it, you can't see it. So this is just a standard. A lot of people see better than that. You can see something in 10 pixel high font. There's a lot of people who don't. Again, be kind to those who can't see as well as you do. Contrasting colors for easy reading. This is really important. Example here, a lot of people feel that red on black is a punchy headline. Well, it isn't for anybody who cannot see the color. So 8% of our population, and it's mostly men, are colorblind. They have a color vision deficiency. And what they would see is black on black in this image. So what you always want to see is a clear definition between what's in front and what's in back. That's contrast. And it's important for people to be able to see it. Not everyone's blind or colorblind, but somebody might have, again, bad vision. So these things are, again, about being kind and being accessible. We'll talk again more about that later. You always want to keep a balance between images and text. Any good site gives you pretty pictures to look at and text that makes sense with the pictures. And that is what you always want to do when you're using images as part of your structure. Now, this is not the same as if you're an artist and you're showing off a portfolio. This is just general information about how to use images when they are there to support your text. People skim, people read fast, people are busy, and they want to just immediately know if this website is useful to them. So it's always important to make important information prominent and repeat it as if you have a long page. Sometimes I call CTAs or things like that a tease and click. You've given somebody a little bit of information and then you've given them a link to go further and learn more. We'll talk about that a little bit more as well. Always keep your structure consistent. So if you're using buttons, they should always look like a button. If it's a link, it should always look like a link. The point is that if you want somebody to interact with it, make sure that that is clear. You're not designing a game where they have to figure out what they need to click to find something. So these are not the places to be creative on your website. There are plenty of other places. You can make your buttons look really cool, but they should always look like a button. So you are better practices because we're not at the point necessarily of having best ones. Believe it or not, this is all still new in a way. You want to think like the user. Again, going back to kindness, but also it helps you test your website. It may make sense to you in your brain, but if you stop for a minute and try to think like somebody else, somebody who you might think is vastly different from you, it might help you see that not everything in your site will work for everybody. Or you may find that you're perfect, who knows? And I've got this wrong and I didn't fix it, which just says something about everything. But we read in English, we read from left to right. I did it again, and from top to bottom. And that seems very simple, but it is a true basic. People will not remember that, and then they will put things in the wrong place on their page, and then people won't find it. So remember, if we're going left to right and top to down. What's the more important spot there is that upper left-hand corner. So unlimited pixels do not equal unlimited attention span. So that again, we go back to a website. You don't want people scrolling forever. And you're like, oh, well, this is a big screen. I can see a lot. But think again of your user and when they're on a phone and how long they have to keep touching that screen to make it move to the next thing. This has become a standard. And if you're in any way in a nonprofit or in any situation where you want people to donate or give to you, put that donate button in the upper right-hand corner of your site, because that is where they look for it. So here's a site, it's right there, donate. Here's a site, it's right there, donate. They literally will just ignore everything else on your site and look for that button. So you want to put it in the same place, so everybody knows where to find it. And again, this is above the scroll. So whatever is above the scroll should bring the user in so that they explore further. We'll talk about how you figure that out in a minute, but that is the important part of that. They're only going to see a certain portion of your screen when they start. It's different on a mobile device, as you probably know, than it is from a laptop. And you should always check everything you do on all kinds of devices. Again, we'll talk about that. Calls to action or calls for action are important. You will see them quite clearly on the Essex North Shore site. Reimagine your classroom, find out more. That's a call for action. And it's literally the first thing a lot of people will see on the site, because they'll zoom into that spot with their eyes and go, oh, that's what I wanted to know. If they're new to the site, one of the things about this site is it was developed for lots of different uses. And you will see as you go down, you will find other things like here's take the next step. This is called a call to action. And it's a whole section of it where you might have different things that you want people to do. And those are what those look like on a website. 3 pillars of good web design as developed by me. Information organization, accessibility, and responsiveness. What is information organization? Well, it's literally everything you see on the page and where you put it, right? So you have to know and decide is what is important on your site. Because what I've seen a lot with people is they feel like everything they have to say is important, but you cannot put everything you want to say, or very rarely can you, above the fold. They would all be there and they wouldn't have any reason to go anywhere else. So this is why I talk about start with the smallest amount of information that you can to lead users to more. So it's one picture from a portfolio to send them to that portfolio about that particular art, that sort of thing. Accessibility, it's a much bigger topic than I can cover here. And there are resources about it. But when you are looking to build your own site, even if you're a visual artist and you think people who can't see your work don't matter, you still want to put alt tags on your images. So what is an alt tag for folks who don't know? When I go to an image, I should be able to roll over and see something about it. That's what an alt tag is. Now I'm looking at the site going, that page doesn't have alt tags. That's terrible. But I am going to take you to something that I have set up.
AHA, night, New Bedford tab.
This is a website with a screen reader setup so that you can hear how it goes down. So you see this whole image here. When I click on it, the screen reader should tell me what this image is. You don't hear anything because there's nothing there for it to tell us. They have not put an alt tag on this, so we don't know it's July 13th Kids Rule. We don't know it's brought to you by Buyback. It's really good to play with your own sites.
AHA, night, New Bedford.
See, now
skip to content. Internal link.
It's telling you things. And these are things that you can learn about your site by using something like this. Now, this is a Chrome plugin. That's a lot to learn, but that's what I'm using here just to show you. So an alt tag is something that you literally put in when you're writing your code or when you're inputting your image or however you're building it that says, that's what's going on in this image. And if you've gotten used to this on social media, great. You already know what I'm talking about. When you post an image, you should always put an alt tag on it for any number of reasons. But most importantly, it helps with people finding your website. The more you talk about what's on your website in various ways, the more it helps your SEO. But also for anybody who can't see well and is using a screen reader to tell them what's on the screen, they will know that that's an image with kids. They will know it's about the AHA July 13th kids rule. So this is why it becomes important. Color contrast, we've talked a little bit about that before. It's about accessibility, it's about readability, the same with font size. So that's where some of the core concepts fit right into this idea as well. Responsiveness is how your website works on all kinds of screens. So how it works on a mobile device like a phone or a tablet, as opposed to a laptop, as opposed to I'm sitting in front of a screen that's, I don't know, 20 something wide, it's huge. So you have so many different ways that your website can look that it's very good to design it to fold down to this. And a lot of design is taught that this is essentially, I folded this website down to a mobile view. And a lot of us are taught to build from this view first, to look at how it would look on the phone and then build up to how it looks on larger devices. Because phones are a basic, I mean, when you look at the stats of who's using your website, you're going to find a lot of people there on a phone. So it's got to look good on a phone. So it's a good idea to start there. How does it look when somebody's looking on it on a phone? And then bring it back up to how it would look on a big image. And you'll find that if you go to look at any of the design courses, this will be one of the first things they tell you. The little things are big on small screens, and that's another reason to do it. It may look short on your laptop, but when you look at it on your phone, how far are you scrolling to read all of that information or view all of the images? So it's a good way to look at it. And we have very basic things here that you can look like repeating info on long scrolling pages. If you've got an important CTA and you want people to see it more often, and you know on the phone it's going to go on forever, then you might want to repeat it a few places, that sort of thing. Now, there is some good stuff after all that info dump about where you can get creative, and this does go in a little bit more into graphic design, but your fonts. You can always have fun with fonts, but it's important that you still pick good ones. So that's something you should go and research. What is a good web font? What I can tell you is that Google fonts are free and easy, and they are all designed to work well on digital devices by default. So you don't ever have to worry, or you don't have to worry as much about a Google font. There are still bad Google fonts, so be careful. But generally speaking, if you're working from these, you're going to be okay. So it's a good place to start. And then if you get into fonts, you can do more. Always mix images and text. So, you can do more of that. How creative you get with mixing images and text can be very much a fun part of the structure of your site. And of course, your copy create. What's a good way to get somebody interested in what to do? Is it arrows? Is it stars? Who knows? So here are very few resources. My apologies for not having a little bit more, but these are some really good ones. And if you're really interested in learning how to build a website the old-fashioned way with HTML and all that, Aqua Gymnasium is really good. It's again free courses. And you can even get into their, gig program and get jobs if you pass them. But it's more important to me that it's a really good resource for learning. And the W3 schools are excellent for all that as well. Plus, there is a great web style guide that will give you more information on the structure of sites and what every piece is called, which I couldn't do all of that here. And again, accessibility guidelines, and any of these resources will help you find other ones like things that you can use to test your website, or like that Chrome thing that I had that was a screen reader and shows you how people with low vision use a website. And then there's info on color blindness for anyone who might be more interested in and checking your site to make sure it looks good to everyone.
Helen, I've got a question here from Paula. How do you put in alt tags?
That's a very specific question. I would have to say, how are you building your website? If you're using a page, if you're using WordPress, it will have places where you put in the alt tag. If you're doing it by hand, it's literally in the code. When you build a tag, you put an ALT equals, quote, your alt text, unquote. So it depends on what you're using to put in, to build your site, where you put in your alt tag. And if you're on social media, most of them now give you the ability to put in an alt tag in various ways. I hope that helps, but it really does depend on how you're doing it.
Paula also commented, most business owners really only have access to preset websites, which are basically scroll pages.
Well, we are talking about the basics of website design, not how you're building your site. I will be having another seminar on how to build sites, especially with the kind of tools that you're using, where you have templates and preset ways of doing things. So please, that's where those questions are for. This is just, how do I assess my website? Is it good? Is it bad?
DJ Jewel said, my site is a DJ website that also promotes my photo booth business.
DJ and photo booth. That's nice. That's very interesting. One thing about DJ stuff, because it's all audio, always remember, don't have that audio on automatic play, because you never know where somebody is. So give them a button to listen. And that's a key. Again, that's a structural thing, but it's also a kindness thing, right? You're at work, you hit somebody's site and it starts blaring. It could be the best dance music in the world, but it may not be appropriate for the situation. So that's a key thing in that sort of site. I'm sorry, it was DJ and what was the other? Photo booth? Photo booth. See, that's good. That's very visual. So that's cool. But just remember, again, when you're doing stuff visually, let people know in text, in your alt tag or in your text, what's happening as well. And just be creative about that too. But yeah, that's nice. That's got a lot of really good stuff to do graphically, but the basics are still the basics on the site. So I can't think of anything that's really different except that audio component and how you choose to use it. I would also consider on a DJ site, and I don't know if this is possible for you, but a video or some kind of visual to go when they hit that play the music button to help keep them in that space, maybe to keep them on your site. So they can keep playing the music and go somewhere else.
Thanks, Helen. I've also got something else from Becky here saying, I'd like to build a portfolio site for 2 visual artists for people who don't use social media. How long can alt tags be?
Think again, go and get that screen reader plugin for your Chrome or something and listen to it. How long do you think somebody's going to want to read about that alt image? Keep it short. We're not talking essays here. So, again, think of your user, think of the person who can't see it or can't see it well and wants a little more information. What's the most important thing in that image to tell them? This is where social media and having to post images and alt tags, we get to practice it, but you can also go and look at people's alt tags and see good ones. So what works? Think if you can't see that image, what's the most important thing? Is it the red apple? Is it the little girl? Is it the sunlight? Is it the atmosphere of the photo? So you have to do a little work to make a good alt tag, but do keep it short as you can to convey the information, but this is not paragraphs, not even a paragraph. It's a good sentence.
Paul asked what a CTA is, and we answered it in the chat, call to action, but also Helen referred to it as call for action. So it can be either or.
It honestly, when people talk about it in marketing and website, it's CTA, but to me that never made sense. So I always call it call for action, even though that's wrong. And it's call to action. And again, the idea, and it's an important concept, is that you're encouraging people to do something on your site, to keep them on your site, to keep them interested in what you're doing, or to get them to do something that will keep them connected to you. So that's why it could be a subscribe button for your newsletter, or a contact me, ask me your questions form, or a poll. Tell me what you think about, I don't know, French fries, right? So you have to add the thinking about what creates a call to action on your site. So if you're a writer and you want people to read your content, then that's your call to action. Go read this, it's great. If you have a portfolio and you want somebody to see the newest thing you've put in, that's your call to action. See my latest work. Does that start to feel like we understand call to action now? I want to see a few more heads. I know nobody's got heads to nod, but it's an important idea, and it's all about information organization, right? You want to look at all your content that you think your website should have, and you want to see what's the most important thing. They have to know who you are. That's your logo, your identity, your branding. Upper left, right? You need to give them places to go on the website. That's your menu. But what's above the scroll? What's the thing they need to know? Are you a writer? Are you a DJ? Are you an artist, right? Are you a design professional? And then send them somewhere, right? Give them something else to do. Go look at my video, scroll down, you'll see, goats, things like that. That's the way to look at what your content is. You may have an essay on something. You're not going to put that essay above the fold on your homepage. You're going to put something that makes people go, "Ooh, I want to read that essay," above the fold on your homepage. And that takes time to learn. And it means you have to look at your content objectively. Yes, everything you're saying is important. But seriously, some of it is more important than something else. And all of it, believe it or not, can be condensed in some way or another. And that's another thing, especially for people, it can be hard. You put all this effort into your beautiful prose or your wonderful photos, but nobody can see all of it at once. Nobody can ever get the whole picture. You just have it now because you've done it. And now you have to break it back down into its parts and show people how to get into it. And if you go look at websites with that knowledge in mind, you'll see how people do it. You'll see that they put up a video that teases you to take you to the next thing, and so on and so forth.
I have a quick question. So I do a lot of different type of events, from like clubs, mainly for a younger audience. I do radio and I do weddings, which is normally I'll say like 30 to 40. And I kind of wanted to incorporate all the facets of my everything that I offer pretty much in my website. I didn't know if that made sense with like, I guess with kind of like the audiences that I'm going for, because they're very different audiences.
But
so
they
like I
could overlap, right?
Yep, 100%.
Because they could be at one point in their life, and then at another point they're going to want that wedding, right?
Yep.
So that's a reason to keep them around too. That's why you want them to know all the things you do. Because once they trust you for one thing, one service, they're going to think, "Oh, I'm going to go back to DJ because that worked good." Okay. So that's a reason to let people know all the things you do. But it is hard, and this is my problem too. How do you let people know all the things you do quickly, right? So that's usually something that you want to use your navigation partially for that. Like, here's all the stuff I do, and that's a drop down, and everything's there. It doesn't have to be in their face on the homepage, but there's creative ways you can do that, and that's where your creativity comes in. How do I put all these things together in an image? Maybe there's circling, swirling things and all the things you do. Maybe it's a slideshow. Here I do this, and then I do that, and then I do this. Click on this one if this is what you're interested in. So, and you want to have that in a couple places. So if you're using, for instance, and it's kind of boring, but nevertheless, it's still good and it gets clear to people. It's a slideshow. Here's a slide of one thing I do. Here's a slide of the next thing I do. Each one of those slides has a button that says, find out more about that thing. Now you've put all your information on above the fold on your website. People can see that it's moving, so they know there's more, so they'll look for it or they'll wait for it. But you also have it up in your navigation under about what I do. You have each one of those things that you do as a section on your site that people can go and learn about it. And if there's a way to combine all that, like on your contact form, and this is a good thing to think about because contact forms are part of your site structure. A lot of people now, and I think it's a good idea on your contact form, is you give them a checkbox. I'm interested in weddings. I'm interested in, and it's a checkbox because maybe they want to be interested in more than one thing. You never want to turn somebody away because you think they won't want two of your services at once. You don't know. Leave the world open for that opportunity to happen by letting people know what you do. Unless you think, there are people for whom there are things that they do might clash, that's another thing. But if everything works within a world, even if they're different worlds, right? If it's all music or if it's all entertainment or if it's all, but I'm trying to think of an example that isn't That's safe for work. But there some people have different kinds of occupations that they don't want people to know the other thing. That's one thing. But generally speaking, you should let everybody know all the stuff you do, but just try to keep it, again, little bits. That's why the slideshow works so well on websites. Right there, you see a visual, working a club, doing a photo, whatever the thing is, and a button that takes you to that section of your site that tells them all about that. Now, if you have 3 things you do and you want a short site, you could even put those things 3 things down the page. You don't have to take people off to different pages. There's lots of ways to build that structure differently depending on how big your site is and how much you're doing. You can always start small and build out. So that's another thing to think about when you're building a website, is starting smaller and building up to bigger stuff. You don't have to have everything ready, right? A lot of people think they do. You can start with a landing page and then start adding pages as you understand what you want to add to your site about what you're talking about.
Page says, yeah, what is the acronym you used? SEO.
Search engine optimization. So if we don't, and we're going to give a short, brief, and not very coherent lecture about what it means to have a search engine. What is that, right? So Google is a search engine. And how it works is they have code that we call robots. And we call them that. They literally crawl around the websites, reading code, reading your website, so they can tell people where it is and what it is, right? So when I say having alt text on your photo is important, it's because that spider is going to go look at robot, excuse me, is going to go look at your site, and it's going to determine things about your site because you may or may not have the alt tag. So if you do not have an alt tag, you will get lower in search engine optimization. You will go down in searches because Google and all other search engines want you to follow the things I told you today. So they want you to have your alt tags. So if they're not on there, even if you think nobody ever needs them, you'll get downgraded in your site and how it comes out in a search return if you don't have them. So that's part of SEO. So then again, those robots, they're reading your site. And think about something that's not just reading what you can see on your website, but all the stuff behind it, which is another reason why we want it to be good. That search engine knows whether or not your site is good on a mobile phone. And again, it will downgrade you if it is not. So it's not just about your user, although we would like it to be. It's also about how people game the search engines and try to get higher up on those lists. Now, there's not a lot you can do, but those basics will help you. And that's a very important point that, again, I feel like, oh, I didn't get it right in the presentation, but here's my chance to emphasize it again, right? Everything I've shown you and taught you in this very short, very brief, and very high overview is important to getting your site up in those search engine rankings. As much as any little old person can do it on their own without a big company behind them, which you don't even want to get into. Now, so when you're, and again, this will be part of my other seminar, how you assess various tools to build a website. You want to know that your tool or you understand those things about SEO. And it's not just your alt tags and whether your site's responsive, it's a whole bunch of other things, which is why you have to go and learn them. And I can't teach them all to you here. It's just a huge amount of information that really makes that work. But why we're having a seminar on how to pick the tools to build a site is because those tools will do a lot of that for you. And it's why it's better to use them. Unless you're really a geek and want to learn how to code, those tools are going to be better for you on that level as well. And it's why the geeks are using them now too, because who wants to think about all those things? And why I'm excited if AI can write my code for me next week, because I'll be more than happy to send it to them. So, this is where technology is good, as long as you know what you need from the tool. So we'll get more of that in the next seminar. This was more of a high level thing in that regard, but it's still true that you can assess what you're looking at with some of what I've given you today. Go and look at any website. Look and see if you can find their give button. Can you find their subscribe button? Things like that. You can't see an alt when you're on somebody's website unless they've made it explicit. But you can use a screen reader or something to tell you whether or not there are alts on the page. Or, and this is something I can show folks, on any browser that you use, this is Safari, it could be any number of things, but you can find something that will show you the page source of any website, yours or anyone else's. So here is the code that writes this site. And you can see if you scroll here, this South Coast Terrapin Project, NECWA, like where do I see? Well, that shows up in this tab here. So these are some real basic things about a site, right? The icon that you see next to the tab, it's set up here, right? Here's the navigation explicit in the code. That's because I wrote it. Anyway, but all of that's here. You can look at any site this way, and you can learn a lot about how sites are built by doing this. And you can look for all those things and understand how some of what I've talked about in terms of structure fits in right here. So we have navigation. If you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see that there's a footer that's literally here in the code. So when I talk about those things, they're real elements in a site.
Becky says, do other browsers have screen readers or is it just Chrome?
Now, any browser can have a screen reader. I put that extension on Chrome so I could show people how a screen reader works very quickly. I don't have much experience with actually using them because I don't need to. I just check my sites with them. So this is just a tool that Chrome has. So almost all browsers will give you a way to get that extension or to download it. Also, the accessibility resources I gave you can send you to sites that can assess your website and show you how it is seen by people or read by people. So they have tools to do that.
Do all screen readers start at the very top, like the header, or is it possible for them to start where you want to click?
No, you don't get to tell people how to read your site that way. The screen reader is going to read it the way eyeballs do, starting. You can't really, the user who's using the screen reader can do changes, but you can't affect what the screen reader is going to do. For instance, I hit my own site with the screen reader and got to hear it reading out all the code for the SVG. Now that's a certain kind of image format that can be written in code, which makes it very lightweight. But for a screen reader, it's actually reading the entire thing. So I have to figure out how to make it not do that, how to make it so the screen reader doesn't read it. So, and there are ways to do that. You put something in that says like, you know, ignore this because it's not something the screen reader needs to read. And again, your tools can help you with that depending on what you're using to build your site.
I have one more question for the color blindness.
Mhm.
Are those resources that you sent and Marinelle is going to send out all the resources and links to everyone. Everyone should know that. Is there a way to check our websites to see if they
Conform
are
to
clear?
accessibility.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then there are a number of sites out there. They tend to change. That's why I try to give you the link that'll take you to the link. But yes, there are various kinds of websites that you can put your website in there and it will show you what the website looks like to a colorblind person.
Exactly.
It emulates what they're going to see, or it emulates a screen reader, that sort of thing. So those are available as tools. And again, through the resources I gave you, you will find those tools, or you can look them up. But I prefer to get them from a site that's, you know, about accessibility rather than a random search. But that's the way to go. Yes, those all exist. And if you're serious about your site, they're a great thing to do. And you will learn, you know, like I did, unexpected things.